Tropics are heating up very quickly as we have three different areas of development in the Atlantic Ocean, all with the potential to become hurricanes over the next 7 days, and one of which is in the Gulf of Mexico, and that will be heading towards Texas and Louisiana, where that could become a tropical storm or hurricane by as early as tomorrow. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about all these tropical disturbances that are beginning to develop across the Atlantic Ocean. We are going to begin with what's happening across the United States and in the Gulf of Mexico right now, and notice the majority of the lower 48 is relatively dry. We had a couple of little disturbances move through both the southeast United States and also back through the northeast, and neither of which really brought anything significant other than just rain over the last few days and a little bit of a waterspout activity back over in the Great Lakes. Really what we're going to be talking about a lot though today is going to be the Atlantic Ocean and the tropics, and one of the things that we are also going to be talking about is this plume of moisture that continues to sit across the Gulf of Mexico and back into areas like Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina, where showers and thunderstorms continue to be a problem and continue to dump several inches of rain. And this stationary frontal boundary that we have in place is going to continue to do that for the next few days. And the reason why this is so important is because we have this little tropical wave that is currently in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico that is going to be able to be fueled by some of that moisture over the next few days as it slowly meanders off to the north into a very warm Atlantic Ocean water basin, and at least in the Gulf of Mexico. So it's a very favorable environment, and this is going to be moving into that over the next couple of days. This is the latest from the National Hurricane Center. We have three different areas of development, and notice we have a red area now in the western Gulf of Mexico. Now that does not necessarily mean we are going to see a category 4 hurricane or something like that. What that means is that there is a high likelihood of development of a tropical storm over the next 7 days, and really in the next 48 hours, there is also a medium to high chance that we see a tropical storm develop in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. Now, over the next 7 days, we are expecting this to move to the north, and honestly, I would expect by about Wednesday or Thursday, this to make landfall somewhere between South Texas all the way back into parts of Louisiana. And the reason why we are going to be talking a lot about this is that it's going to probably make landfall in the United States. There is currently a very good chance that this will become a tropical storm. There is definitely a chance that this becomes a hurricane. It's not a slam dunk forecast if this does become a hurricane, but it could, especially with the environment that we have in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's been untapped for months now. The last tropical storm that we've had in the Gulf, or even hurricane, was Hurricane Debbie and also Hurricane Beryl. Those were both a long time ago now, and the environment is definitely ripe for there to be a tropical storm or hurricane. We also have two areas of development out in the Atlantic Ocean. I would honestly still be watching these pretty closely. Initially, these didn't look super concerning, but the problem is it is a very disorganized area of thunderstorms right now, and if one of these does develop, we could see one go towards the United States in some way, or even the Lesser or Greater Antilles. So we are going to talk a lot about this as well as we go throughout the forecast today, so definitely keep that in mind. This is a closer view of what's happening in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico right now on the infrared imagery. Notice there's been a lot of convection over the last 12 to 24 hours. This is all thunderstorm activity that's developing around this particular tropical wave, and though there's nothing really organized quite yet, it is giving an indication that we could see intensification over the next 24 to 48 hours. Now let's look at the spaghetti models for Invest 91L, and Invest 91L is what we are currently watching for in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. Essentially what that means is that this is being investigated by the National Hurricane Center, which is something that could become a tropical storm or hurricane. Right now, over the next couple of days, computer models are still very all over the place in terms of at least short-term forecasting. This is not developed yet really into anything. There's been some convection, but we don't have a low pressure center yet. So I still think the forecast is pretty dicey, still pretty hairy. We don't really know what's exactly going to happen yet, but a lot of the models do range over quite a large area 2 days from now, anywhere from about the Mexico coastline as far east as very deep Gulf of Mexico waters, which if something like this does go this far to the east on this blue line, it would have a much better chance at intensifying into a stronger tropical storm or even a low-end hurricane. But a lot of the models do continue to keep this closer to the Mexico coastline, which would basically mean that this would have a little bit tougher time of intensifying. But eventually, I think as this goes closer to like Wednesday or even early Thursday, I think it'll have a better chance of intensifying as it gets closer to either the Texas or Louisiana coastline. But I do want to mention that there could still be some major changes to this forecast as we don't yet have a low pressure center. Once we have that, and if this does end up becoming a tropical depression or even low-end tropical storm by Monday or Tuesday, I think it'll be a much easier forecast by then. But for now, we are kind of at a standstill until until something actually starts to develop. Here's what the ensembles are showing, which also give you an idea of basically where this could go. Ensemble members continue to, basically bring this anywhere from the Texas coast, which would mean a very, weak, basically tropical depression or low-end tropical storm. And on the flip side of things, a lot of the ensemble members that bring this towards the Louisiana coast do bring this to a stronger tropical storm or a low-end hurricane, which is not something that we want to see out of this. Now, this is one computer model, which is the GFS model. It is a deterministic model, so this does sometimes struggle with giving a good idea of what's going to happen, but I do think this is important to look at because the GFS model has been very consistent over the last couple of days in terms of how intense this gets and also the placement of this tropical system. So this is by Tuesday afternoon. Notice how a low pressure center develops, 996 millibars. That's at least a low-end tropical storm. By the time we go later into Wednesday, so around Wednesday evening, this quickly intensifies over the Gulf of Mexico down to a 978 millibar low pressure center, which basically means that this is a very strong tropical storm and even in many cases a low-end hurricane. This is pretty similar to what Debbie was for reference. This is by the time we go into early Thursday morning. Notice how this continues to intensify a little bit more as it moves towards Louisiana as a 976 millibar low pressure center, and that would indicate again most likely a low-end hurricane and eventually crashing into Louisiana. And then eventually as we go into Thursday into Friday, we could see a tornado threat appear in Alabama, perhaps even Mississippi, Georgia, and eventually maybe even into areas like Tennessee as we go into Friday, depending on how intense this does stay inland. So that's why there's concern about this. Now again, we do have a lot of time between now and then. There is still several days. Obviously it's Sunday. This is probably going to make landfall sometime between Wednesday night and Thursday, but I do want to mention that things could change. We are going to continue to keep you posted on the channel with this, so make sure that you're subscribed down below. Now, there are also two other tropical waves back over in the central Atlantic Ocean, and the reason why these two are concerning is because right now the long-term forecast is very hazy, but if one of these does develop, we could see one of them sneak past this high pressure system and perhaps even go towards areas like Florida or somewhere near the United States. There's also a chance this could curve out at some point, but it is something we're watching for very closely. There's a lot of messy stuff happening out here in the central Atlantic Ocean. Lots of thunderstorms, really nothing organized yet, but we very easily could see one, if not even maybe two tropical storms or hurricanes develop out of this activity over the next 7 days. This is what the GFS model shows across the entire Atlantic basin over the next 7 to 10 days. Notice how that first little tropical wave attempts to develop, but just kind of fizzles as it moves towards the Lesser Antilles. Again, it's pretty uncertain what's exactly going to happen with that since we don't have really anything developed yet, but it is something we're watching. Another one just behind that, notice how this one starts to intensify a bit more by the weekend, and then eventually as we go into the week, going in closer to like September 17th and 18th, notice how this intensifies quite a bit into actually a hurricane, and in some cases the GFS model has been indicating that this could become a relatively strong hurricane, perhaps even a major hurricane, as it just meanders out here in the central Atlantic Ocean. Now granted, this is by September 20th, which is now about 12 days from now. Things could very easily change between now and then, but this one could be very unpredictable, which could make this a bit of a problem, because right now the GFS model is bringing this really far to the north, but if we do get a high pressure system that just kind of sits out here to the west, we actually could see this turn more towards the United States. So it is something we're watching. Again, there's a lot of scenarios that could go down with this one. We're going to continue to keep you posted with the latest on this as it continues to evolve. For the rest of the lower 48, for the time being, the weather continues to stay quiet pending this next tropical development. Once we go into the weekend and into early next week, we're not really looking at much of any activity that's organized across the United States. I still do think as we get closer, at least to the middle or even end of the month, we are eventually going to see a trough ejection over the Rocky Mountains that will return some severe weather to the United States. Where that exactly is remains unknown. The general area I'm thinking is the central or northern plains or even back into the Midwest. And then once we go into sometime near the later half of the month, we'll probably end up seeing a little bit more activity. But for right now, things are relatively quiet aside from the tropics that after a long hiatus are beginning to heat up, and I do think we'll have our next named storm within the next few days here across the Atlantic Ocean. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.